Hi everyone, Mr. Rowe here, just checking in with another video lesson. Today I'm doing lesson 2 of the new unit, Quadratics number 2. And the good thing about this lesson is there's a couple things in this lesson which kind of go over what happened in the first lesson. So really the binomial multiplication lesson, you'll see me do that in this lesson as well. So let's get to it. So today we're talking about the standard form of a parabola. So this is another equation of the parabola. We've already seen the vertex form, that gives us the vertex. We've seen the factored form, which gives us the zeros. Now there's this new form, and it kind of looks like this. So again, this is going to kind of be a hybrid lesson where I have most of the note filled out already, and I'll be filling in a few gaps along the way. So this equation does not look like our factored form, it does not look like our vertex form, but it is indeed the equation of a parabola, as you can see when I filled in this table of values. So again, filled in the table of values the same way we've done before. You take these values of x, so for example this one, -3, you plug it in for x in the equation, as you see me do here, and it tells you what y is. So when x equals -3, y equals 12. So that's off our grid. So the next one was -2. When I plugged in -2 and did the algebra, I get 5, and you see that -2, 5 is the point of my graph. If I continue to do this for all the points in the standard set, and then join them, you see that indeed I do get a parabola. So what are we going to learn about the standard form? Well, let's fill in our key pieces of information. What way does this parabola open? These arrows are pointing in the upwards direction, it's opening up. The step pattern, starting at the vertex, is over 1, up 1, over 1, up 3, over 1, up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the y-intercept we observe is right here at 0, -3. So the question being asked is, what do you notice about the equation of the parabola and the y-intercept, which is -3? And if you look closely, we see the y-intercept's -3, and this value also kind of shows up in the parabola. So is this a coincidence, or is this something that we can count on going forward? And it's not a coincidence, this will always be the case. So I already had this pre-typed out. The value of the y-intercept shows up in the equation. There we go, put that down there. And where does it show up? Right at the end. And the reason this happens, in case you're interested, is because the y-intercept's always going to occur when x equals 0. So when you put in x equals 0 into an equation that has x's in the first two terms, those first two terms are always going to go to 0. That's going to go away, that's going to go away, and you'll always just be left with that term. So there's a couple more examples, and again, I've done all the really hard work of doing this table of values. Again, you won't be asked to do this. What our goal is for you to know when you see an equation, whether it's factored form, vertex form, or now standard form, are you going to be able to extract the key pieces of information? Now, factored form and vertex form are actually very useful because they give us very important pieces of information. Standard form, not so much, because the y-intercept really isn't that, it's not really that helpful to develop a full picture of the parabola. So for these two, I've gone ahead and done the table of values again. So you can do this algebra on your own and then just double check with these notes. And I've gone ahead and made the graphs down here. Now you notice this one's -2x squared plus 12x minus 10. And when I did the graph in blue, you see that it actually opens down. And this is not surprising because we've seen stuff like this in the past, where if this a value is negative, this value in front of the x squared, the coefficient of x squared, if that's negative, it's going to open down. That's the same as it was for vertex form and factored form as well. Whereas over here, you notice that this a value is 3, positive, and that's why we have a parabola opening up. So what's the step pattern? Over 1, down 2, over 1, down 6. Okay, so -2, -6, and then -10. And I didn't need to get it off the graph. You know that because if you take this value, -2, and you multiply it by 1, 3, 5, the standard set, you're going to get -2, -6, -10. So to get the step pattern, you take this value, the A value, in this case it's 3, and you multiply that by 1, 3, 5. So 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 5 is 15. And then as we saw in the last example, and I'll just highlight this in red, the y-intercept does indeed show up in the equation. You can't see it on the graph, but you can see it here when x equals 0, y equals -10. And then over here, you see the y-intercept should be +9, and when we look at the graph, this one is on the graph, it is +9. So, in summary, this is the general form for the standard form of a quadratic. It looks like this. It's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So we now have 3 forms of the quadratic. And just like vertex form and factored form, this a value has the exact same effect. It's going to tell you the direction of opening, and it's going to give you the step pattern. The vertex form will give you the vertex, the factored form will give you the zeros, the standard form, which is this form, will give you the y-intercept. So, now what we're going to do is we're going to start converting from form to form. Going from factored form to standard form is actually pretty easy. It's when later in the unit, when we try to go the other way, that'll be a little more difficult. And the way you do this is by expanding and simplifying, and that's why we had to learn how to do that binomial multiplication in the last lesson. So in order to convert to standard form, you must expand and simplify. So I left this one blank because I'm going to do it with you and walk you through it. So this was basically yesterday's lesson. You might not have noticed, but when you're multiplying a binomial times a binomial, that's a quadratic in the factored form. So that was building the skills to do this, to convert from factored form to standard form. So I've done the first 2 for you. I'll do this third one for you. So if given a scenario where you have an a value and then a binomial, I always multiply the binomial times the binomial first. And how you're going to do that is you take the first term here, which is x, and you do a distributive property. So you're basically pretending that this -4 doesn't even exist. And you're just doing a distributive property with the x. So you would get 3. We'll leave that on the outside. X times x is x squared. And then x times 2 is 2x. And then what you do is you take the next term in the binomial, which is the -4, and you distribute that. And you pretend that this x term doesn't exist anymore, and you just do a distributive property. So -4 times x is -4x. So that's why you saw all those arrows are all around the last lesson. So -4x, and then -4 times 2 is -8. You can simplify this a bit. You have some like terms. The variables and the exponents have to be the same in order to add. So you can't add x squared to x. But if you have 2x and you take away 4x, that will leave you with -2x. Those are like terms. And then the last step would be to do the distributive property here. So it's going to be 3x squared minus 6x minus 24. So it was in factored form. We knew that the zeros were positive 4 and negative 2. You remember they're the opposite of these numbers. We knew the a value is positive 3. And now we converted it to the standard form. So we see the a value is still positive 3, which means the step pattern will be 3, 9, 15. But now we'll be able to tell what the y-intercept is, because that will be this value at the end, negative 24. So at the end of the day, you need to be able to do this. You need to be able to look at these equations, know what form it's in, and then be able to extract the important information. So you're going to have to be able to look at this and say, okay, this is in standard form. I know the direction of opening is going to be down because that a value is negative. Down. I also know the step pattern is going to be negative 3, negative 9, negative 15. I got that, again, by multiplying this a value by 135. And then the y-intercept is going to be that last value. It's going to be 0 minus 4. This one is also in standard form. The a value is positive 2. Because it's positive, we know it's going to open up. The step pattern is going to be 2 times 135, so it's going to be 2, 6, 10. And because it's the standard form, we know the y-intercept is going to be 0, 5. There's no way for us to get the vertex. There's no way for us to get the zeros. So it's not the best form in the world for giving us information. However, going forward, we will learn a method to take this and go back and put it into the factored form, which will let us get the zeros. And then we know already how to get, if we have the zeros, we know how to get the vertex, which would allow us to get the vertex form. So that's where we're going with this. 3 forms and knowing how to get from form to form and all the different information. So this one looks a little bit different because there is no value at the end. And if that's the case, well, there is a value there. We're just going to say that it's equal to 0. And this is going to open down because that a value is negative 1. Therefore, the step pattern is negative 1, negative 3, negative 5. And then the y-intercept, well, that value, there's nothing there, so it's just 0. So we're going to go 0, 0. So that's about it for this lesson. So try the homework, which is on the next page, number 1 and 2. So it's, again, expanding to get into standard form, and then a little bit of practice on doing what we just did. Okay, so that's 2 lessons I've done in the last couple of days. Again, the goal is to have about 3 hours of work, which is about 3 lessons, or if there's an assessment, maybe 2 lessons in the assessment. So just message me if there's any questions or concerns, and there will probably be 1 or 2 more lessons posted sometime this week. Take care.